Good evening and welcome to another lightning fast Darwin Innovation Hub class. Now, tonight it's all about what business owners wish they knew before they started. Now, some of these you're going to go, yeah, I've heard this before. Some of them you may not have actually considered before. All of these are ones that come up again and again and again by people who get into business only to find that all the YouTube videos and all the books and all the gurus online couldn't have quite prepared them for the reality. So, what does this look like? Warning though, this will be very quick tonight because we actually have a very set sort of idea about what the things are that people mostly miss out on. I did a bunch of research to make sure that this came out right, just because honestly, online people can be very unreliable with what they tell us about what people think. So what I wanted to do was make sure I did research and checked it and checked it and checked it. And this is like the top 10 things that really came up again and again and again. Now, the first one happens to be how much time it really takes. Now, this will vary wildly depending on the business you're trying to build. For example, if you're building out a business and you've got a whole heap of money to go and get yourself a shop on a main street where there's lots of foot traffic and you've got parking right out the front, it may not take you as long to get a success as what it might take if you're working from home, doing your own, work from home business or consulting and things like that. But most new business owners expect more freedom. They think that if they ditch the job and go into business, they're going to have more freedom. But the funny thing is that when you start in the very first few years, you could find yourself working 50 to 70 hours a week and getting paid very little for that. The safety net's taken away from you. There's no 38-hour week when it's your business. That only applies to employees. So a lot of us then have the ideal and go, well, I'm not going to be like that. I am going to have work-life balance. And the reality kicks in is that there is no work-life balance when you're first starting a business. It's a myth. Like anyone who's managed to do this, they're either lying or they're the one in a million that happen to pull it off. Because you've got to balance administration, bookkeeping, sales, marketing, and then delivering whatever it is that you are delivering. And those early clients that you get are going to be very, very demanding. So this is one of the things that really does not get taken into account is how much time you need to spend just working for very little money, sometimes no money at all, at the very beginning, just to get some momentum. Just think of it this way. The old locomotive trains, chugga, 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 chugga. Hopefully someone hasn't recorded that. They take a while to get started because it's all about going from a complete stop to trying to get that first bit of movement. The first customer is one of the hardest you'll ever get. The second hardest customer you'll get is about your 50th, and that's when you're scaling up. And that's another point we have to look at. One thing that most, I think, business owners, when they first go in, don't realize is just how much having working capital is necessary. And by working capital, I mean money before you go into it. You have to have some kind of safety net. Look, I did it without that. The first major business I attempted really did have a lot of money go into it and completely failed. But the one that I actually finally did succeed with, I didn't require any upfront cash to do it. I just was working a full-time job. And so I just put money from that into what I was doing little by little by little, just to keep the thing going. Profitability is important, but it's cash flow that keeps the lights on. And it's not just having enough money today, it's having enough money tomorrow and next week and next month. The flowing of cash into and out of your business needs to happen, and it needs to be as reliable as possible. You need to maintain enough spare cash. And that means, to save up for your taxes. If you're paying GST, you need to have some kind of savings, even though they're not your savings, they're the business's savings, in order to get you through those slow months. Because what happens is if you have a slow month and you've lost 80% of your normal income, your expenses are still about the same. Your rent, your electricity, even if you're working from home, running the aircon, running the heating, whatever it is you're running from home, you do need to have that buffer. So those first few months, you're probably not going to have a buffer unless you've saved a considerable amount of money to get you through that. So cash flow is something that most people don't really expect they need a lot of, because they listen to some guru on YouTube who says, oh, you can get started for nothing. You can build a six-figure income in 30 days. And none of that works. None of it's real. None of it's true. you do need to have some buffer, some sort of pool of cash you can dig into when things don't go according to plan, and especially when something unexpected like a late paying client comes up. Because if you're really, really early in the game, quite often one really good paying client delaying their bill by an extra 30 days can absolutely sink you. And that certainly sank one of my earlier businesses. My key client that represented over 70% of my income at the time just simply stopped paying their bills on time. And that completely crushed me to the point that within 3 months, I was dead. I was gone. There was no more business in there. I couldn't absorb anymore because there was no cash coming in. Another area is that your marketing never really ends. You're constantly promoting. And people who watch me on something like LinkedIn would know this too, that it never stops. I never stop. Every day, 3 times a day, I'm doing something that keeps me visible to a group of followers or to people who maybe not my followers, but are on some other platform. Good products and services do not sell themselves. You have to sell them. So marketing is this constant flow of effort that you have to do. It doesn't necessarily mean you're constantly spending money on marketing. It just means that there's a constant lot of effort going into your marketing. And another part of that, and marketing is very much this, is the networking too, the building connections with people. A large part of your role as a new business owner is promoting to real people, networking with people who can then connect you with other people, and that magical thing of building a brand, which is a really hard thing to do when you're coming from absolutely nowhere and you're kind of used to being in the background. Now, some of us, we're used to being up front and we're okay with being the person, the face of the business. But for a lot of people, again, that takes a lot of momentum to get going before they've got the confidence to be able to step in front and not just be the salesperson, but often to be the person on the video as well. I wasn't born able to do these webinars like this. This is a learned skill over a long period of time. So don't compare yourself to people like myself who are on here all the time. You compare yourself to where you were yesterday and just getting a little bit better every day. That's the thing that I guess never stops, is you also never stop learning. And I guess that ties into marketing, because marketing always changes and the nature of business always changes as well. So what we want you to do is to make sure that you understand that marketing isn't something you do once and then it just works. You can't just put a couple of Facebook ads on for $5 a day and let them run till the end of time. They need reviewing. You need to be able to go and see the results of that. So marketing never ends. What else are we looking at? Number 3, having a business isn't about doing the the thing you love. I know that so many of us want to start that thing we love. We might have, done a little bit of research into Ikigai. We might have done a little bit of research into passion projects, and we've been listening to podcasts which you talk about these founders who had this grand vision and dream for their lives and created this one thing that they loved. The reality is that people who succeed beyond just paying for themselves in a business generally didn't start off in mind of just doing something they love. You're going to have to do other things in your business as well, not just the thing you love doing. Let's say, for instance, you're an artist and you really like creating sculpture. The actual creating of the sculpture is only part of what your business is about. You start because you're passionate or really good at something, but then you have to also be the bookkeeper. And you'll be surprised by the amount of time you spend checking on the figures, because they are what makes it a business. The pottery, the sculpture doesn't make the business. That's an activity, but it's not what makes the business. Bookkeeping is what makes a business. And you'll spend a ridiculous amount of time, especially in the early days, doing your accounts. Now, these days, I've got accountants that I pay to do all of that. And I pay probably an amount that you probably think is kind of ridiculous. But when I compare that to the amount of hours I would be spending and what my hourly rate is, it's cheaper for me to employ them to do all the bookkeeping and accounting for me. And then depending on the area of business you're in, there's also the compliance. So making sure you're complying with all the legal and regulatory requirements that may be in your state, your territory, your country to do the kind of business you're doing. That could be health checks. It could be, for instance, putting in reports. Some of that compliance could just be paying GST. That's something which I've struggled with all of my business career. Finally, over a decade into this, I'm finally putting aside my GST reliably every time money comes in. If you're hiring people, whether they are people on Upwork that you're contracting to do a particular job for you, or it could be a virtual assistant in another country, or even if it is a real live employee here in Australia, you're suddenly the HR manager too. That takes time. People are messy and difficult, and sometimes they're unreliable. And there's a certain kind of person that will work for a tiny business. They're not generally the kind of people who fit in well as employees elsewhere, which is why they love working for solopreneurs and people who are doing the thing on their own. It's because they feel like they're working on something that's got meaning, or they feel like they're working on something where they get to be heard. The problem with that is you're the boss. You're the person who has to hire, but sometimes you're also the person who has to discipline and fire people. And that means you become a manager, not just the person who way back then was doing the pottery and doing the sculpture. You're now an HR manager, a compliance manager, a bookkeeper, sometimes an accountant doing your tax at the end of the financial year. And you are the salesperson, the marketing assistant, the sales assistant. You're all of these things at once. So the thing you love may be what you started the business doing. But in the early days, before you've got enough momentum and cash flow to pay for people to do things, you are all those things. So that's something which I don't think a lot of people going into business realize in the early days, at least, that they'll be doing so many different things involving so many different skills that were definitely not the things that they got into business to do. And when you do get into that moment where you're starting to hire people, it's a lot harder than it looks. It's not just about finding the right people and then training them and keeping them engaged, which is very hard on its own, just to get the right person, going through resumes, interviewing people, getting to know them, feeling a vibe that you feel they'll fit in with your business, training them. And what I did in my earlier digital marketing agency is I hired about 30 different contractors, 5 full-time staff. And what happened with my full-time staff, I wanted to actually get more because I had the work for them, but I couldn't keep them because what happened, I'd find them, I'd train them, and then they'd go and work for the government because the government at the time during the pandemic was paying ridiculous amounts of money for people to work for them to do all kinds of relatively temporary jobs related to the pandemic. And so all I was doing is training people up to work for the government. They weren't doing any work for me. They were running at a loss for me until they were fully trained. And then they jump off to somewhere else and then I'd do it again. This is why I sold the agency, is simply because I became a hiring agent and a training agent for the government. The other part of it is too that a bad person in your team can cost you a lot. Now, you may have met them, you vetted them, they haven't had a bad record in the past, and you hired them, and then they absolutely turn on you. They undermine you. They may financially cost you. They could be fraudulent, all that kind of thing. And that bad person in your team can be like the bad apple in the barrel that spoils the rest of them as well. They really damage the morale of your team and they can really damage those customer relationships. Relationships that you could have taken years to build up could be destroyed in like a minute by a bad hire. But one thing that isn't listed here that's really hard about hiring is the compliance that comes with hiring, understanding superannuation, understanding pay as you go tax, the contractual nature, the process of firing people if you need to get rid of them, or when it comes to having to remove people not for bad performance, but because the business has gone into a downturn, there's processes you have to follow to avoid being, sued for unlawful dismissal. There are industrial relations rules you have to follow. You can get around some of these things by becoming a member of a chamber of commerce and getting some industrial relations advice from them or from your government's own industrial relations bodies. But you didn't get into business to do any of that stuff. You got into business to do the thing you love, most likely. So when it comes to this, hiring is a lot harder than it may seem in the first place. You think in your position as an employee that the process of being hired is pretty straightforward, right? But behind the scenes, that person hiring you is like a little duck on the lake. It's like this graceful looking machine sliding along the water with these little legs just going whole time just to try and keep things moving. It's hard work hiring people. This one, oh my goodness, this one I just completely obliterated in my earlier businesses. This made so much trouble for me of not having documented processes and systems. Without systems, without processes and templates, and even some automation, life can get really messy really quick. And the consequences of this means that you can't scale up. And it's very hard to sell your business if you want to sell it later, because people don't just buy your client list, they don't just buy your products. When they buy your business, they're buying your systems. They're buying how easy it is for them to walk in and keep doing what you did, which means everything has to be documented. Every system, everything that you do, everything has to be filed in such a way that someone can step in and take over. Now, this is not just for selling the business. This is also for getting new people in to manage the business. When you're growing that fast and you want to step back from the management, put a manager in there, they need to know what to do. And you can't spend 6 months just training them on how to be a manager. You need them running from day one. So the only way to do that is to have all these systems documented and ready to go. I cannot possibly exaggerate how important this one is. They're all important, but this one is overlooked so clearly. So from the early days, when you do have the time and you do have the passion, start documenting what you do and how you do things, because it's the thing that's going to make you sellable in the end, but also it's going to help to make you replaceable in your business. And that becomes a very important thing further down the track when you do start to succeed and you do start to scale. Your first customers are probably not going to be particularly great customers. I'm being honest here. The early clients, they bring in the cash you need when you need it, but they also tend to be looking for a bargain. So you'll be very tempted to be charging very little for what you do just to get some market share. I did the same and it burnt me out ridiculously, caused me a terrible reputation in a particular market I operated in because I couldn't deliver on everything I committed to because of the price I'd done it for. These early customers may not be a good fit for you because they tend to underpay. They're looking for a bargain and they tend to be very demanding and very, very high maintenance. So, what you probably should be doing from day one, and I know this is much more easily said than done because it will slow you down in the beginning, but honestly, it will save you so much trouble down the track, is find the ideal customer that you want. It takes time, it takes confidence, it takes a bit of courage in order to identify who your target is, like the right kind of person, that special sweet spot of the kind of customer who has the money, is willing to pay the money, that they value the work you do, and that they are a dream to work with. They are so hard to find. They are so hard to find because they are just rare. And they are mostly loyal to the people they already do work with. So they're not going to jump very easily over to you. So quite often what you're doing, you're either trying to convince people to jump to you, or you've got to spend a long time building a market of your own and a pipeline of your own of people who do really like you. And that's all sort of done online, where people are willing to pay more for you because they need to work with you. They are convinced they have to work with you. It is emotional. One day you're making tons of money, the next day you're making no money. One day you're winning a business award, the next day you're being slammed online and bullied online by people. It can be really, really hard on your mental health, and it does take a toll. There's a bit of isolation there because you're not seeing the people you used to see at work. Your support system may not be there because just about everyone you know works a job, so they don't really understand what you're going through as a business owner. It's going to be hard there for a bit, and there's constant uncertainty. So that shifting sands of not knowing what's coming in this week or next week or the week after, all that stuff will take an emotional toll on you. There's some great stuff happening with the government at the moment. The federal government does have a program that you can get a hold of, which is a mental health coaching project. It's done through Beyond Blue. And Beyond Blue are offering a free, I want to say it's eight sessions for you to be coached through mental health. It's not counseling. What it is coaching for business owners to be able to better prepare themselves for this kind of thing. You'll find that the Beyond Blue website is a fantastic initiative. I'm actually going through it myself. Got my first appointment with someone, with my coach next week, where we're going to go through what I can do now to better prepare myself for the growth that my business is going through as well. So it's not just for new businesses, it can be for any business owner who wants to get a little bit of a mental edge, or at least know what they're coming against, and knowing where they're going, and what they're going to be up against in the future when it comes to their mental health. Now, you also need to understand numbers. Even if you hire an accountant, you still need to know what's happening, because after all, you are still responsible, even if an accountant is doing the numbers for you. You got to understand what your margins are. How much do you make on top of the cost of doing that business or producing that product? What's your break even point? All your indicators, so as cash flow projections, all those things. I made so many mistakes early on because I didn't track the right metrics. I just saw money coming into the account. I saw money going out of the account. I wasn't really keeping an eye closely enough on what was happening with that account. So what ended up happening is I lost track of it and got myself into a lot of trouble, and a lot of debt trouble with the Australian Tax Office as well, which I'm still paying off to this day. It's manageable now and it's much more under control, but it was pretty scary there for a while when you've got demand letters coming from all kinds of people, including the Australian government. So you do need to be on top of those. I think we go into business thinking that it's going to be really simple. We make money, we spend money, freedom, right? No, it's not that simple. Tax is complicated, and you need to understand at least the basics of what your figures look like. I've got a spreadsheet that is just so complicated that I just put in when I get paid things, and I put in when I'm invoicing things, so I can track how my business is doing. And it will tell me, whether I'm going to be in trouble in 3 months' time, or whether I'm going to be looking really good in 3 months' time, or in 6 months, or even 12 months' time, based upon what's happening right now. So, whilst I don't expect you to have that level of complexity set up from day one, it's something to really get under control, that you know what's happening with your numbers. Number 9, growth can break you if you're not ready for it. And it certainly did break me in one of my earlier businesses, where I did have to grow a business really, really rapidly during the pandemic. And scaling really fast in a business without all the right things in place can lead to delivery not happening, customers being very, very unhappy with you, and cash flow crunching. Because sometimes, when you hire that first person, you think, oh yeah, well, I just need to have enough money to pay me and to pay them, and then I'll be right. But then you just don't understand how much extra there is with paying someone. There's extra everything. So, and then on top of that, it's never just what they're getting paid. It's also all the stuff you have to consider with superannuation and payouts and tax and all the additional stuff that comes with that. So when you try to scale really quickly, you need to have a lot of money behind you in order to power that scaling. If you don't have a lot of money and you're just literally working off your current cash flow of what's coming in, you could get into trouble really quickly. One client not paying on time could mean that staff member's not getting paid. You times that by 30 and you've got big trouble ahead. What you want to aim for is sustainable growth, something it's a little slower. It doesn't mean you're going to build an empire tomorrow. It might take you 10 years to build an empire. It might take you 2 years. But the reality is, trying to do everything in that first 2 to 3 months is unrealistic. Even if you're in a fast, high growth area where there's massive amounts of money coming in, the people who tend to make that massive amounts of money already have all the systems and the people in place that they can sort of shuffle over from one project into another. So please, don't allow growth to break you. Be ready for growth by making sure you've got money aside as you start to make it, money aside to help you to power that growth in case something happens to go wrong. It was a very quick one, I know, tonight. Thank you very much for joining me. But I hope that's given you a bit of a heads up into all those things that we wish we knew before we got started in business. I'm well over a decade into it now, and I've overcome those problems now. But I tell you what, some of them I only just overcame recently. So even 10 years into this, over 10 years, like 12 years, I think now into it, it still isn't 100% there. So bear that in mind. Sometimes these things will come back and bite you in the future. So if you want to see more great webinars like this, more great classes, they're always live. They're always with me. I'm in the Gold Coast at the moment, hence why I'm putting on my winter woolies, because I'm not actually in Darwin right now, although that photo is from Darwin because the people's house I'm in put that photo up. I took that photo many years ago for them. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you really enjoyed that. And if you've got any questions, please do come and see me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Dante St. James, and you'll be able to see me there. Thank you. Have a great night, and I'll see you again in our next one.